Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts.
I want to start off this installment of the Broadcasters Podcast by quoting the famed director, Oscar-winning director, Martin Scorsese. When he spoke during the closing night screening of The Irishman at the BFI London Film Festival, he talked about how the MCU, the superhero movies, they are theme park movies or theme park films. And then he also referred to it as amusement park films. And let me quote from him here. Theaters have become amusement park. By the way, this is from 2019. He said this. October 13, 2019, as reported by Hollywood Reporter. Theaters, quote, have become amusement parks. That is all fine and good, but don't invade everything else in that sense. That is fine and good for those who enjoy that type of film. And by the way, knowing what goes into them now, I admire what they do. It's not my kind of thing. It simply is not. It's creating another kind of audience that thinks cinema is that. And then when you see the return of the pandemic to people to movie theaters, and you see the movies that are out, the ones that have dominated the movie theaters in this year of 2022, for the most part, it's not even so much superhero movies as they are franchises. Rehashing, recreating, restoring, and renovating and reviving new films from just bringing them back. With a couple of rare instances where it's not. If you just look at the last of this year in the box office, the annual box office so far for 2022, let me look at this right now. Domestic theatrical market. Your top 10 movies right now. Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann film, so far, $122 million, and it was released June 24th. Uncharted, which is based on the Sony PlayStation game, that's 9th. Sonic the Hedgehog, based on the Sega Genesis game, 8th. Spider-Man No Way Home, Thor Love and Thunder, Marvel movies, Jurassic World Domination, the final of a Jurassic World franchise has gone over for 20 years, Minions The Rise of Gru, a sequel of a very popular Despicable Me series, The Batman, DC, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, also Marvel, and Top Gun Maverick. That's it. There are no shocking movies from out of the independent circle that all of a sudden became something big. No, nothing like that. Nothing that's just come all of a sudden that are just so box office crazy. We haven't had anything like that this year. Any that are truly Oscar-worthy performances. And we're not talking about CGI. We're not talking about the design, the layout, the production behind it, the editing. We're not talking about that. The performances. They're good, but, where is the thing about taking movies that might be adapted from books or adapted from other things or just original screenplays? Now, we know that some cases, some of those types of projects, they just become TV shows or they become films that go to streaming. But the cinemas are obviously made for superhero movies. Because of the way it's built out, the experience, the superhero movies are becoming an event experience. Like you go to a concert, like you go to a sporting event. That's what this has become. And while Martin Scorsese is concerned that cinemas are only catering to that crowd, well, they are. There's not many other movies that are out there that'll really stand out. Of this week's cycle, we got Nope from Jordan Peele. That's about it. Not a lot of horror movies, not a lot of genre movies that are outside of the superhero genre or outside of being original screen movies that we've never seen before. That's very different too. And that's what you look at across the board. It's quite fascinating about what's out there and what's not been able to be made. But that's where we are right now in everything when it comes down to it. But nevertheless, there's where things are. And, you have to go with the audience and what they want and what they're really interested in more than anything, which is why the San Diego Comic-Con, which has been around for over 50 years, continues to be showing the way for everybody. Hollywood Reporter put a very expansive story on this and talked the revival of the Comic-Con because it's the first time they brought it back. And Aaron Couch writes, after absence, Comic-Con regained status as key studio marketing launchpad. All the major studios, especially the ones that have streaming capabilities and streaming services, or those that are pushing out towards theaters, their plan to get that 30 to 45 to 60 day exhibition window in play for these movies to get some major bucks and then push them to streaming to whichever service they are. That's where things are right now. It's the system in play. The biggest bucks possible. It's not even a matter that these studios are even doing what Martin Scorsese would talk about, where, yeah, the necessary evil of these movies to happen, because we need those kind of movies to be able to have the other kinds of movies we want. We've talked about that with guests here on the program, that we have to have certain movies that happen in order to get the other movies to happen. It has to go that way. Even actors, in order for them to keep getting paid, they have to take some movies that they don't want to do to get the movies they really want. That's Hollywood in a nutshell. So they talked about, at Comic-Con, the highlights. Marvel Studios had a number of projects in play. Lord of the Rings, a supersized Dwayne Johnson appearance, and why Comic-Con is still a must-attend event. Quote, we have to earn the right to have fans engage with us. So some of the things that were brought up, Dwayne Johnson came out in costume as Black Adam as part of a Warner Brothers panel. That movie is coming up later this year. Amazon spending big on Lord of the Rings of Power, which will take place thousands of years before Peter Jackson's films. The series launches September 2nd, and they put a lot of money into it. And of course, comic books were also brought up into play. We know about that. And there were certain noteworthy panels that were brought up to talk about. Marvel Studios talked about plans for its multiverse saga, 2 Avengers films, and an emotional first footage of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Then you had Lord of the Rings of Power, most expensive TV show of all time. Tolkien enthusiast Stephen Colbert emceeing a Hall H panel featuring series composer Barry McCreary, including a full orchestra, a new trailer, and 5 scenes from the series. Then there's Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, another rehash from the 80s. Warner Brothers had a first trailer for Shazam! Fury of the Gods, bringing back the youthful fun of the first. And then we had Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, in costume, floating above the stage over a crowd of 6,500. Even though there was no mention of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom of the Flash, they were sorely felt in the year where Marvel ran circles around the distinguished competition in terms of sheer volume of projects it brought. Star Trek had a bunch of presence there. Paramount Plus taking a victory lap for their recently wrapped Strange Worlds with jokes about those Anson Mount hair memes, while Sir Patrick Stewart showing his first look at the Next Generation castmates back for Picard's 3rd and final season. Then you had Teen Wolf being featured, Walking Dead being featured, and that there will be long-awaited movies of The Walking Dead on a limited series on AMC, among other things that are being brought up. And I want to get on the subject of what they talked about with Comic-Con and how the movies are brought in. When I look at what movies we've had this year, and just saying to myself, I guess I'm an anomaly. I'm one of the few people that want to go out and see the movies on a regular basis, but right now it's been tough. I mean, to go and see what movies I wanted to watch this year and what I have seen this year, it's not been easy. I mean, I don't have that many options. I've taken some movies that I really would not go see, but because I have a limited plan, I just went ahead and tried to go see it anyway. I can look right now at the last 3 months on the Regal website, and the movies that I went and saw, at the end of April, I went and saw Memory, which was a Liam Neeson movie with Guy Pearce. You know, it was okay. It was watchable. Top Gun Maverick I watched on Labor Day weekend, and then that Saturday I went and saw the Bob's Burgers movie. No, actually I had to wait till the following week to see the Bob's Burgers movie because of a whole mix-up. First week of June. Second week of June, Light Here. Third week of June, Elvis. No, actually that one I had to miss too because of a whole thing that was messed up. That's right. And then I had Elvis, and I watched the first week of July, Thor: Love and Thunder for the second week of July, and Minions Rise of Gru. I don't normally watch animated features, but I did, because what else is there? And the thing is, there's not a lot of independent films to watch either that are really stand out to me. Even when I look at what's coming up, I mean, it's really tough to see what there's available to go and watch of the release schedule. I mean, there are still movies out there, but the other problem we talked about early in the year was there were going to be so many movies that were going to be held back because people were not going to go ahead and catch them. They just decided, well, there are certain movies that don't need to be pushed into the theaters because obviously the superhero movies and the action movies, the big blockbuster movies are always going to take precedent. And there are certain studios that don't feel like they need to go ahead and put a movie out there for an alternate audience because certain alternative audiences are not coming back. An older audience, a more female audience. They're not coming back for rom-coms. They're not coming back for, there's not been a lot of horror movies either. So if you're only going to get the superhero movies, I mean, it's a good crowd to have, but that's not going to fit 52 weeks a year. How does cinema survive on that? I mean, you think of what movies they have and what's been available. Like, you know, there have been a few movies that have obviously stayed around and held over. You think about Top Gun, it's probably been held over like 8 to 10 weeks, maybe for longer than that. Same thing going for any superhero movies. With Batman, I know that was around for a while, but remember, in some of those movies, there's only an exhibition window available for 45 days or 30 days. And then it goes right to streaming. So even if there was a case, the movie theaters are only going to get, if it's 45 days, 6 weeks. Maybe if you're lucky, 8 weeks for a movie. Maybe 10. But that's it. Because of the way things are right now, there's not that outstretch of movies that come up, and there's not enough that keep getting brought in on a regular basis. When I look at what Regal Movies gives you right now, on the current setup, if I want to go see a movie this weekend, and I look at where my theater's at and what they have available, it's tough. Now, if I want to watch something, I'd have to go see DC League of Super Pets. I'm not necessarily all in for that kind of movie right now. I don't know. I mean, it's The Rock and Kevin Hart and among others. I could see that. They got a couple of Bollywood movies because this particular theater does like to show Bollywood movies. They have Vengeance, which is a new movie with BJ Novak, and I'm not much interested in that. Nope. I'm not a big horror fan. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, which I forget, that's a movie that was brought back, right? Paws of Fury, The Legend of Hank, animated, Where the Crawdads Sing. Not interested in that. I already watched Thor, Love and Thunder. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, no interest. Minions I already saw. Elvis I already saw. Black Phone, I know it's a good horror movie. A lot of people are saying that. Not my movie. Jurassic World Dominion is still going on. They still have Top Gun Maverick going on right now. 2 months after the release. 8 weeks. Pretty good run for that. Everything Everywhere All at Once, which has gotten a lot of good praise. And then I have to wait for the following week for a number of movies because we have coming up next week Bullet Train. It's August 5th, Easter Sunday, the Joe Coy Filipino comedy. So they're going to try to go up to that Crazy Rich Asian / My Big Fat Greek Wedding type of spiel. That's what that's going to be. And there's a number of movies I don't even know what they are coming up August 12th. A thriller suspense movie called Fall. I don't even know who's in this here. You could fool me with what movie this is. I don't even know what it is. A movie called Fall, and the cast, I don't know anybody of this, so I couldn't tell you what it's about. And if I keep looking, there's also a movie called Mac and Rita, which I don't know anything about. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. But, like I said, Bullet Train I'll watch on August 5th, most likely. If I go and look at the rest of the schedule, Beast and Dragon Ball Superhero, I might just go watch Dragon Ball Super. I did watch Broly, so I might go see that. I mean, if it's there, I'm not afraid of watching anime. I'll go watch it myself. Oh, Beast is the new Idris Elba movie that's coming out where he's out on the safari, so that might be interesting. I don't know if I'll go watch that. I'm thinking about it. I'll consider it. And really, going into the fall, there are not a lot of movies available that are really going to be interesting and really going to stand out. You have a movie called Barbarian, which I don't even know anything about. Justin Long, Bill Skarsgård's a part of it. Okay. Couldn't tell you what that's all about. It is a psychological horror. It is a scary movie. Okay. Those usually happen in the fall. Then you got September 16th, Silent Twins and the Women King in wide release. Avatar, September 23rd in a wide re-release. The original Avatar, by the way. Then you got Bros Smile on September 30th. La La Crocodile with Shawn Mendes playing the crocodile on October 7th. Halloween Ends October 14th. Black Adam October 21st. Pray for the Devil October 30th, the 28th, right before Halloween. Amsterdam November 4th, which looks amazing. Black Panther Wakanda Forever November 11th. Armageddon Time is November 11th. The movie She Said is November 18th. Thanksgiving weekend, you got Bones and All, Devotion, Strange World, and The Fablemans. And then I'm looking at the end of the year. There's not a lot right here, man. Christmas time, not a lot. Avatar: The Way of Water, December 16th. I Want to Dance with Somebody, December 21st. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, December 21st. Shazam! Fury of the Gods, December 21st. That's pretty much it. And there might be other movies that are in the mix, but they're all kind of being pushed back. Let's talk about Tomb Raider 2, Sherlock Holmes 3, Minecraft, among others. And we're not seeing any of these movies being pushed up into the schedule. I mean, there's not like there's a whole lot more superhero movies in that later part of the year. There's not. I mean, besides Black Panther, is DC's run to go with Black Adam and Shazam. That's it, pretty much. Now, the next thing I got to bring up, which is really interesting, is, and I really don't understand what this story, why this is going on, but we're going to talk about it. GQ Magazine putting out the fact about Netflix and Stranger Things, or the beloved Stranger Things we've talked about many times on the show. If it's not about the talk about Kate Bush and Running Up That Hill, or Metallica's Master of Puppets, or the show itself for season 4 and wrapping up the season, this is something I would be concerned about. GQ Magazine writes that the Duffer Brothers plan to retroactively edit episodes of Stranger Things, and how this could be the beginning of a worrying TV trend. I'm going to read about this here. Now, they've openly discussed making tweaks. They're planning on it. We don't know if that's actually happening yet, but I would like to go and see where they're coming from. In an interview with Variety Magazine in early June, the Duffer Brothers confirmed to George Lucas, or retrospectively edit, has been the Star Wars progenitor's unpopular bent with later editions of the original franchise trilogy. They're talking about a moment in Stranger Things Season 2 owing to a fan-identified plot hole. A simple mistake of an expansive series costing $30 million an episode, really. The creative team set an episode of Stranger Things 4 on March 22nd, forgetting that it had been established as Will Byers or Noah Schnapp's birthday in the earlier season. The error is mostly anodyne, singularly offensive to the most hand-wringing of pedants, and certainly not something that needs to be fixed after the fact. And the reason for the tweak, they didn't want the fans to feel sad or be mad at them for their negligence. Those kind of things happen all the time. All the time. Why do you want to go back and then take the time and spend the money on that? Why do you think there's always books out there that after the fact they get footnoted? Sometimes you get done with a project. Sure, you might have things, I could have done this better. I could have added this. I could have filled this plot line. And I watch professional wrestling. There are holes in plot lines all over the place. And that happens all the time. And people can point that out all they want. But, people do that just to go and have things like this happen, because then that validates their claim. And to me, it doesn't make a difference. What can I say? Moving along, confirmation was given the Variety that, quote, we'd have George Lucas things also that people don't know about. This is what Matt Duffer said. Quote, he declined to touch upon the specific alterations. One of the rumors was a shot of Jonathan photographing Nancy from the bushes outside Steve's house had been removed, has proven to be false. Yeah, like a peeping Tom kind of thing. Editing a continuity area after the fact would be fairly innocuous, if not for the implied slippery slope. No one can ever convince me, a rational person, that anyone aside from a subset of weirdos online who could actually care. But hey, said tweaks bode no dramatic change, and if there wasn't a news story, the vast majority of viewers simply wouldn't notice. Season 1 came out 6 years ago, after all. And it's not as though most watchers are tracing back character beats like an archivist for Ancestry.com, as much as I'm sure the Duffers would like to think the Kool-Aid has been more than widely sampled. A show like Stranger Things, the most highly watched series on Netflix, boasts huge cultural cachet. If the Duffers are doing it, who's to say other creators won't? He's right. One-day patches might become a commonplace in screen media that there are in video games. That is a truly worrying precedent for consumers and the equity of art alike. Look, we already get that kind of issue now of retroactively, correcting the past, which is what cancel culture is. This is a kind of response that would be a cancel culture response. Well, and they're going to say it's for personal reasons. They need to fix it themselves. Okay. But still, you're doing the same thing. You're responding to the mob, to the people online or people that are out there doing content creation and deciding to point something out just to make you sleep a little bit tougher at night. Duffers, you've made your money. You made your project. Why don't you put out a documentary where you explain the plot hole and then you kind of satisfy and satiate the audience? Why does it matter? Why do we even care? Because really, how many people are really that, what a great word, pedantic? Who is really that anal retentive to follow Stranger Things to the point of that? I mean, listen, don't get me wrong, there are super fans. But are they going to really be upset with a couple little things like that? I mean, if you are, that's not you're worrying about the lowest common denominator for the fans that are watching it and spending money on the music, watching the series, subscribing to Netflix. Now, I wonder if this will be a thought process for people on Netflix to say, okay, they could use this idea and say, all right, go ahead and retroactively edit the shows. We'll put them out as director's cuts, right? Like, there's a thing to be said about, there's a precedent we can also talk about too. When you think about Justice League and Zack Snyder doing a director's cut, did it get a whole lot of press? Did it really make much more money after that? No. But it was done, and it was something that was brought up to kind of make people feel good about it. But we're not talking about doing a different edition of Stranger Things. We're talking about going back to the original episodes and uploading them again with these things taken out. Now, I understand things like that happening where maybe there was some improper or indecent or some content from years past that might not be so good to show now, right? I mean, let me put it to you like this. I'm, was the biggest fan of Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes cartoons back in the day, and we know there was some racist, stereotypical content on there. I mean, Tom and Jerry, let's just talk about the maid that was working and always kicking Tom out of the house or always going after him. Like, it was 30 years ago, they decided to go ahead and let's switch out the maid's voice because it was offensive, because it sounded like a mammy. It sounded like some racial stereotype from the 1940s that would have been done back in those days and would trigger people now. And you know what? I understand that point. So there's some of those things you can worry about and you can consider, but do we need to do that for everything? I don't know if I feel like that's something that's necessary. Anyways, that's a pretty interesting story as well. So I would keep an eye on a story like this and say to myself, okay, could you see more directors or screenwriters or others that will point out, hey, you need to fix this, and they'll go back and fix it? I don't know. I wouldn't want to make a big deal about it either, but Variety got them to say that. That's a story. So if it gets out there and it's only plans, maybe there's enough people in the audience out there, maybe this program or to other programs much bigger than me, that might listen to the show and they say, you know what? We need to write to Netflix and say, no, Duffer Brothers, screw you. You don't change anything on Stranger Things. You don't go back and retroactively edit anything. Don't do it. And I think it's probably the best course of action. So coming up on the program, we'll have a few more stories to bring up to you. We've already talked about the revival of Comic-Con. We've already talked about retroactive editing of a Netflix show, a top-watched Netflix show. Now we're going to talk about royalties. Royalties. That's coming up. And then we'll also talk about podcasting. WTF with Mark Maron, celebrating 13 years and deciding, okay, my contract's done. My latest contract, I'm going to a new partner, a new platform. We'll talk about that in a moment. And also coming up, we'll talk about podcasting when it comes to iHeartMedia, bringing podcasts to the metaverse and the metaverse to podcasts. And also cannabis ads in legal states. We now have a standalone bill that's been proposed in the Senate. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a few minutes. So stay tuned for that. We're going to continue moving on now with royalties. Royalties for content creators and royalties for music. Very interesting time of what's being done here. Music Business Worldwide reports on this. Facebook will now directly share a proportion of ad revenue with music rights holders for user-generated content videos. And then they say, your move, TikTok. So the parent company of Facebook, Meta, and others, Meta has announced that they're going to change the way artists and music rights holders are going to be paid from Facebook. It will now be moving to a revenue share model for user-generated video content. Remember I talked about this a few weeks ago on the program. Remember we talked about the royalties. 2 weeks ago, episode 235, I talked about the crusade for musicians and all content creators to get paid more. I brought this up 2 weeks ago. And a story from Music Business Worldwide talked about the fact of when will TikTok start paying the music industry properly? We know people always complain about the rights fees when it comes to Spotify and when it comes to other podcasts out there. We talked about that. And by the way, if you have not done so, please, I highly recommend take a look. It's a very simplified website now, broadcasterspodcast.com. I did a redesign over the weekend, or 2 weeks ago, actually. I redesigned the logo and I redesigned the website. I took some time. I fixed it up, made it a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner to go and look at. Took some of the gunk out where it was kind of hard to look at the very top of the header. So I cleared that out. An easier to use WordPress theme. I thought it would be something better to go and use. So I decided to put this together. So there's that part. This is already where we're seeing royalties and people trying to get their monies off of their content already. When it comes to music, we already know that BMI and ASCAP are asking for separate court hearings to set the royalty rates. This is for radio, remember? Then you look at what's being done on the social media side, where, you know, there's an outcry for TikTok to start paying the music industry for what they're getting from their music. Remember, they only made $4 million on revenue, what was it, 2020 for what they're doing, or 2021? And that the revenues are expected to triple to $12 billion in 2022. And that, if I remember what they said, I believe they said it was, 13% actually goes to, 13% of the revenue goes to the record labels. Right? $12 billion annually from advertising is what e-marketers are reporting that they're going to get. So Facebook wants to be ahead of the game. And they want to be one of those first people to go ahead and say, okay, we want to go ahead and make sure that we're paying our fair share. So this is what's going to happen now. Meta's conferred to Music Business Worldwide that video creators who choose to use licensed music in videos over 60 seconds long on Facebook will receive a 20% share of any advertising revenue generated by their creation. That's a pretty big percentage. The other 80% will be split between the appropriate music rights holders and Meta itself. This is where Facebook continues to go along and say, please put your videos up on our platform. Please, and promote Facebook. Get it out there. That's what they're trying to do here. It's a smart strategy. And so if they can get more of an audience there to their site that's kind of declining in terms of users, then do that anyway. That's the whole idea for this, which is a pretty smart idea for them anyway. There's no reason as to why they're doing that split, but the explanation for Music Business Worldwide says that the music industry is being paid a direct share of every bit of money being generated by an ad or a user-generated content Facebook video that uses licensed music and over a minute long. It also means users on Facebook, including influencers with lots of followers in the platform, will now be monetarily incentivized to the tune of 20% of a share to promote licensed music they love in their posts. Wow. That's pretty cool. And then they also added, Facebook also added that with video making up half the time spent on Facebook, music revenue sharing helps creators access more popular music, deepening relationships with their fans and the music industry. And it will start rolling out today to video creators globally. To start, eligible videos will monetize from in-stream ads within the U.S., with expansion to the rest of the world where music is available on Facebook in the coming months. And they said that the new payment system only affects user-generated content, not plays or advertising of official music videos on Facebook. Licenses for that content are still being covered by the lump sum upfront payments to rights holders that aren't tied to consumption. And it's only for Facebook, not Instagram. Keep that in mind. So the idea is that Facebook wants to get this licensed music to be used by other content creators, not necessarily paying the record labels or the artists in this way. This is another revenue model where they need to entice more user-generated content to be made with this licensed music, of which a cut will go of the 20% towards the content creators, and a portion of the 80% goes, whichever, we don't know what the split's going to be, but a portion of the 80% goes towards the music rights holders. Because people want to be able to use that licensed music, this is a place where they can go and they can promote it. Well, you can't do this so much on YouTube or other places and get that same revenue stream. So the musicians, the people that are making the music, benefit greatly from using Facebook. Is this enough to get them to kind of use it more? That's the question. And Billboard also talked about this as well, about royalties. Who's afraid of user-centric royalties? This is the same thing we're being talked about here. And Billboard writes about that. In 2021, recorded music revenues increased to $15 billion the 6th year in a row, driven by subscription and streaming. Per stream payouts are getting lower, publishers and songwriters are constrained by regulations and getting a smaller share of revenue, and many independent artists are struggling. So the music industry, if you want the music to continue, there's a reason why we don't have that much new music out there in the first place, and why we don't have that many albums, but a lot more singles out there than we ever have. And we've talked extensively about new music discovery on this program a lot in the last month and a half, and talk about the fact that we have all this music here and we're waiting to get something out of it because, I mean, there might be albums coming out, but they don't last too long. The streaming, the radio's not helping out. There's a whole lot of varying factors as to why musicians are not making the kind of money they're making before. And by the way, when I talk about those, remember I took the Shava Odagian, bassist from System of a Down, a few weeks ago. And I mentioned the fact with him about how music these days, you're looking at the part where you might see a number of artists out there that are just playing covers and not ready to go and make their own content. And part of the reason they're probably not making that own content is because they will make money off of using user-generated content. For instance, user-generated content would include somebody that's redoing the music and covering the music that is licensed, using it somehow. That can be counted as well. But there are artists out there that would just, like, I mean, I heard somebody today, a young lady that's out there that was doing the drums for Master of Puppets because it's popular. But she's not making her own music, or if she is, she's not putting it out there on content because it's not going to get the kind of response like her doing a cover. And this is the biggest part of where things are right now. Because you can put music on streaming, but are people going to listen to it? So they move along and say that streaming hasn't changed the size of the recorded music revenue pie. It's radically changed how it's sliced. And as we've talked about many times, when the music units got changed and streaming became the king, well, it changed everything. I'll tell you, man, I have 3 playlists right now I listen to on a regular basis. I can't repeat it enough. it makes it so easy for me to never go back to radio. When I think about going back to radio and listening to it, when I've tried the few times I've tried to do it, I think about what I'm trying to do to keep myself interested in the music and say, okay, I want to be able to go ahead and I'd like to be able to go and see it where the music's out there and I'm listening to it. And I wish it would sound better when they put it through compression and listen to it through an FM signal. Because the one thing I notice in my car, unless you have a very strong preamplified sound, you have amp power and you have a subwoofer and you have a sound system, a pretty expensive sound system in your car to get the real best sound of a radio station, and more preferably an HD radio, you're not going to get the sound of streaming. You're not going to get the sound of CD quality. Almost cassette quality, to be honest. So when you're looking at that and you're saying to yourself, okay, we're not getting that kind of quality. So what are we going to do here? When I can get what I want, that solid Dolby sounding kind of quality through my headphones or through the Bluetooth of an amplified phone, playing through connected to Bluetooth technology, connecting my phone into the system. I mean, I have a Honda, a 4-door hatchback. And all I'm saying, man, is that the stereo system is not that strong. It's 120 watts. And if I put a radio on, I have to basically put the radio on halfway to the volume just to get it to sound okay. But the louder, of course, you put it, the worse it sounds. But when I put my phone and connect it to Bluetooth, all of you know this as well, that amplification makes the biggest difference in the world. I remember when I had my 2009 Honda Accord, I almost considered putting a new sound system in the back and putting some third-party aftermarket system in. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that this time. Because that was the only thing I was missing in the car. Because I love the car. The seats are great. The drive, the way it turned, the way it rode, the look of it, everything, the comfort, the size, everything about that car was great. And the one thing I was complaining about was the stereo. And when I started being able to go ahead and connect through an auxiliary jack first in 2010, when I learned about that, and then I found some early Bluetooth technology to be able to connect my phone into the radio, the dashboard, and the sound that came out of it, and just continued to keep improving every time I did it. I mean, I remember having a car where I had a Pontiac Vibe and I had a great sound system there, Boston Acoustics. I had a subwoofer back there. It sounded great. So radio sounded good in the car. But the truth is that not every car is going to be like that. They're all not going to get the greatest system anymore. Now you just need a dashboard that has all the information that you need. The infotainment, they call it, right? It's not even so much about the sound of it as it is the functionality and the technology within the dashboard now. But AM, FM radio do not have that sound. And even then, I want to listen to music that's going to just sound kind of off and doesn't have that richness like I get from Spotify or Apple or Amazon. And I'm going to try to listen to all these 10-minute commercial breaks. Hell no. Never again. You can't possibly get me to do that. Which is why you need to do something else to create new music discovery, but radio's not going to listen to me. I'll keep hammering about it, not this week, but I will continue to talk about it. And also, what's the benefit for radio? Because they keep worrying about having to go ahead and cut the little bit of revenue they're making to try to cover their debts and to avoid them from going back to bankruptcy again. Take your pick, Cumulus, iHeartRadio. Their deal is they have to find a way to avoid having to give money back to anybody else. So with the music, they're trying to avoid all the royalties problems altogether. But eventually, royalties are going to have to change. And let me tell you, if they ever do a thing where royalties are going to be accrued on a much higher scale by BMI and ASCAP, when it comes to music that is certain music, certain decades or whatever, imagine if there was a moratorium where music that was recorded before 2010, anything before 2010, had to be paid a higher royalty. Imagine that. Let me give you a better example. How about any song played before 2020 that was produced or recorded before 2020 was due by BMI and ASCAP to get a higher royalty for those artists? What would radio do? They'd have to play newer music to try to play for less royalties and go after the new music that they could play out there. And then you would see a change in formats like you'd never seen before. That would force radio to change, or cut all the music stations out altogether and just go talk or something else. But there are certain platforms that are online now. The digital disruption is now happening here with royalties. The lump sum idea is not only with Meta and Facebook, it's also now SoundCloud and Warner Music Group striking a deal on fan-powered royalties. So Warner's artists will shift to a user-centric payment system for royalties earned on SoundCloud, called the SoundCloud's Fan-Powered Royalties Initiative. It launched last March, retooling the platform, doling out streaming revenue rights to rights holders, and providing more detailed data to help support independent artists on the platform, and allowing independent creators who own their rights and upload their works to SoundCloud through its repost system the ability to get paid according to how fans stream the music, rather than the current industry standard pro rata model, the lump sum. If one user who pays $10 a month listens to 5 artists, those 5 artists would split that $10 after the streamer's cut, rather than a portion of the subscribers' money going to a Drake or Taylor Swift due to their share of overall streaming. This makes SoundCloud the first music streaming service to offer the payment system to independent rights holders, and Warner Music Group the first label to sign on. There we go. Now, just so you know, streaming revenue for the likes of Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music work on the pro rata model and would not be affected. And the reason why the artist would like to have this, SoundCloud says that this model of fan power royalties could go beyond helping indie artists get a higher cut of revenue and delve further into helping them build marketing opportunities, cultivate their fan communities or route tours, and also help artists see, for example, that 65% of their streams are coming from 15% of their listeners, who those superfan listeners are. And a consulting firm, a music market analytics and consulting firm Media Research, published a report saying that out of 118,000 creators on SoundCloud that signed up for fan-powered royalties, 56% of them are better off with these fan-powered royalties than they are the prorated system. 63% of artists that have between 100 and 100,000 fans earning more than the prorated model by a 9.2% increase. How about that? And so Billboard then brought the story up and said, there's been more talk about a user-centric model, dividing the revenue generated by individual subscribers according to what they listen to. So SoundCloud started this system, and the big streaming services and the 2 biggest major record labels or record publishers have either said or hinted they're fine with either system, sometimes because their revenue payouts won't change much, and they'd be happy to make a change if artists and other stakeholders agree. But label revenue and payouts wouldn't change much, obscuring how much to shift the fortunes of artists. And saying you're willing to make a change once everyone in the music business comes to a consensus on an issue is basically saying it's never going to happen. And that's the idea. So the major labels are focusing on acts that they think will be probably popular among consumers who spend a lot of time listening to music, like Drake and The Weeknd, which is the kind of idea that radio thinks it's a very old-fashioned model. They're less interested in acts that might appeal to smaller numbers of dedicated fans, including rock bands. So rock is out of the mix, as it always is, for over 2 decades. And there's a thought that user-centric streaming won't work, but that won't change royalty flows enough to be worth the cost of setting it up. The only way to know is to let some services try it, let others stick with the current system, and see what happens. But if the fans want to support their favorite artists And they could do it this way, and more of the money being generated from subscriptions or from ad revenue can go more towards the artists, the better off. And that's what they're trying to get through here. That's what makes the more difference for all of them out there. And I agree with that. I want to go ahead and wrap things up with podcasting and the part about cannabis ads before we wrap things up. So let's go ahead and bring that up real quick. WTF with Mark Maron. Now, they want to say he's a pioneer. Listen, as you know, yours truly, King of Podcasts, has been doing this since 2005, before they were called podcasts. Now, don't get me wrong. When it comes to all the shows that are out there, right, and saying, okay, of those that are out there, and realizing who are the most popular podcasts out there, okay? Don't get me wrong. There's something you said about the podcasting world and how things are, and knowing that the oldest one of the earliest podcasts, of course, is Adam Curry. He's the Podfather, the former MTV host, who's doing very well for himself. Then you bring in Adam Carolla, who started his show February 23rd, 2009. And now we have Mark Maron, who also started in 2009 and around this time. So he came in after this. And then you started seeing podcasting get a little bit of notoriety because these guys were considerable. People knew who they were. And funny enough, they were comedians who were doing them. And you look at the stories about these podcasters coming into the play. Remember, we had Adam Carolla decided to get into the podcasting world very early on after he lost his show on KLSX 97.1 FM Talk in Los Angeles, as he was one of the few folks that were brought on from Infinity Broadcasting to replace Howard Stern once he went to Sirius. And Adam Carolla started his show January 2006. And then we moved along, and then February 2009, the switch off from KLSX to FM, on Top 40 radio station. So the format switch caused Adam Carolla and the rest of that lineup to go by the wayside, including Tom Likas, decided to sit out, and then eventually would go to podcasting himself. So it's interesting how those people decided to go into that part. Adam Carolla decides to go on and do his own thing, and then moves on to everything else, and the rest is history. He's done his part. So Mark Maron, let's talk about him. Stand-up comedian, actor, writer, radio host, game show host, talk show guest, and podcaster. Popular stand-up comic in the late 1980s. His signature type of observational humor and storytelling. He did off-Broadway, touring, a webcast, book, talk show appearances, CDs, television and movie roles, and more. And then he decided to do this show, WTF. With more than 600 million downloads since premiering, he's doing a bi-weekly show, a breeding ground for candid conversations, and the kind of stars he's had on board. Okay. Nicole Kidman, Bruce Springsteen, Jerry Seinfeld, Mel Brooks, Robin Williams, Bob Newhart, Lily Tomlin, Leonardo DiCaprio, Amy Poehler, Lisa Kudrow, Paul McCartney, Brad Pitt, and former U.S. President Barack Obama. And he makes the point that we were one of the original ones to do a podcast of the celebrities. There were people who were doing podcasting beforehand, but of the major names out there, besides Adam Carolla, Mark Maron did come very early into the game. I will admit that. Quote, and what we were able to do, which I believe influenced a lot of people, was delve into an intimacy and an intensity to the conversations you just never heard on radio. Well, I mean, yeah, you could say that, but there were certain shows that really were intimate. I'd like to think Coast to Coast is pretty intimate, to be honest. Like, they really get into some subjects on there, and they're pretty personable in there. I mean, it is that thing, that type of that podcasting style, the casual sit down kind of feel. It's doing the Howard Stern thing, which everybody's kind of replicated all across the board. I mean, I go on my TikTok feed and I look at an endless number of FYP flips that I make through on the TikTok, and I see of every different show, of every different topic, and everybody having the same microphone. If it's not that Rodecaster, it's the Shure SM7B that I use myself, among others, and it's a constant thing. It's incredible how they all is doing this right now, but that's what they're going to do. He says the podcast is the baseline and foundation of whatever I've become. When we started, no one knew how to monetize it. The entire podcast industry grew up together. We've overcome obstacles on our own and with the community. And now, of course, anyone and everyone has a podcast. The competition is fierce. So he decided to go ahead and join Acast. And the deal guarantees the podcast can continue to be listened to everyone on their preferred listening platform. So Acast taking the show on. By the way, the show with Mark Maron, by the way, let's keep this point as well. Mark Maron was also a radio host, which is one thing we need to make point of, because Mark Maron worked at Air America. And he made the point about when he moved over to podcasting after radio, because certain radio hosts found their way into podcasting, and that's what really did. Radio people really did make podcasting. They got in grassroots. Those that were smart about it. Because remember that. There was something about certain people that were in radio already and found their way into doing it and decided, well, we need to do something about this. So they had no choice. So, for instance, Tom Likas and Art Webb, they started New Normal in 2010. It was in that early time everybody decided to get in there and start doing what they need to do with it. And so that was the idea of all of this. He says at the time, back when he was doing the show in 2009, quote, "We did the first dozen episodes breaking into the studio at Air America late at night and bringing guests up in the elevator and figuring out how to do it. I love that." Quote, "It was really a weird act of desperation in a sense. I had gotten through a divorce. I was pretty broke. The job was over. My radio career was done. I didn't have a TV career, but I knew it was good broadcasting on a radio mic, and the timing worked out. Apple wanted some people with notoriety that would promote the podcast to get people onto their iPads or iPhones. He went back to Los Angeles, set up my garage to do it from, also got involved in social media, would book people with big social media presences at the beginning. There was no way to monetize. It was about the work and doing something new. It would become the #1 podcast on the iTunes comedy charts, ranked third best podcast by iTunes Rewind, and also received the first ever Governor's Award at the inaugural awards for excellence in audio, the AMBIES. And so these are some of the things that are happening here. They make a point in this Forbes article that WTF with Mark Maron or any podcast looking to define the category did not exist in this current era, commonly referred to as cancel culture. Fear of public backlash. We all know about this. He says, quote, "In today's cancel culture, I'm not a big believer in the idea that you can't say certain things. There may be consequences of what you say, of course, so you have to weigh that out. The audience has evolved, and with every different talk, we bring in different people, and with these people, it is my job to get to the core of the conversation without feeling censored." He's still working on other things, by the way. He's working on an FX series right now with his writing partner, taping an HBO special in December in Town Hall in New York, so he's busy. And podcasting still, it's something to be said about the kind of money that's still being made. Because remember, we talked not too long ago about Joe Rogan getting $100 million to move his show to Spotify, among other things. And knowing there were other celebrities out there that were getting their podcasts put out there during the pandemic and making the money. So anyway, Mark Maron is going to be rewarded for what he's doing. Somebody else decided to go and take him on and support his work and put him on a network where he can continue to be heard So this is a good move for him. Acast is a good platform. Good for him. iHeartMedia now wants to bring podcasts to the metaverse. That's another thing we're going to talk about. Conal Byrne, CEO of iHeartMedia Digital Media Group, said that we have over 50 podcasts that drive over 1 million monthly downloads each, and those are across 19 or 20 different genres. So, in June, iHeart announced a partnership with State Farm to launch iHeart Land on Roblox to feature live experiences combining major album releases, some of the biggest hit podcasts, and interactive gaming. And this is all for scale and access, according to Conal Byrne. So why not listen to a music or a podcast while you're playing, building, or socializing in a 3D interactive world? And why not make new live experiences possible no matter where people happen to be? That's the idea of this. And the entry point would be NFTs. And Byrne sees three aspects of NFTs as much more about creating value with them than selling them. Collectibles, community, and content. That's what they're looking to do. So a lot more to that story, but that's all I want to bring up right there. Yeah, let's go to another, again, failing forward. If you're not going to make it on traditional radio, terrestrial radio, which you already own and operate, you can't compete with the internet. Let's try to compete with the metaverse. This is failing forward. Only a corporate entity like iHeartMedia could think of this idea. I mean, sure, people are already putting this out there and saying, okay, this is fine. By the way, Bob Pittman was also brought up in this article, quote, don't assume that you know what audiences want just because the data told you something or didn't tell you something. Data tells you the answers to the questions you asked, not necessarily the answers you need. That's what he's saying. So you got that going for you. And one more update before I wrap things up, and that is the cannabis ads, which I've talked about already on the program. We now have a bill that's being proposed permitting TV, radio, marijuana ads in legal states, blocking the FCC from denying or otherwise penalizing broadcast stations that allow marijuana-related advertising. Let's go into that real quick. Senator Ben Ray Lujan, direct Democrat of New Mexico, introduced the Secure and Fair Enforcement Act, the Safe Advertising Act. And also the recent House spending package is a similar amendment attached. Quote, Lujan, as more states enact common sense cannabis legalization, it is crucial that radio and TV stations can accept advertising without fear of losing their license. And some stipulations, including a disclosure this product has not been evaluated by the FDA. There may be health risks associated with the consumption of this product. Broadcasters must secure reliable evidence. At least 70% of the audience is over 21 years old. National Association of Broadcasters Safe Advertising Coalition support the bill. And as we might know, the three senators that have been working on the cannabis legalization, the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act has been introduced last week to the Senate after being passed. I don't know if it was passed in the House or not, but right now it's currently in the Senate. The bill will remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, placing a federal tax on the sale of marijuana and erase nonviolent marijuana convictions from people's criminal records. So there's a lot of that with cannabis. By the way, this act will only affect radio and television. But we know now that cannabis wants to be able to be effective when it comes to online, which legalization will make an open door for social media down the line, especially in the United States. That's the ultimate end goal. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for listening to this program. Subscribing as you always do. So glad I'll have you listening in. And for those of you that found this show because you heard the Kate Bush episodes or the shows about Drake or Beyonce or whatever we've been putting out here on the program, thank you for listening in. I'm really grateful that all of you check this out. I do my work on this content every week, building out the website, decided to create a new logo. I'm constantly working on this show. And by the way, there is a contact form at the bottom of broadcasterspodcast.com. By all means, please go ahead and reach out to me there. Anything you want to go ahead and talk about, I hope you'll consider reaching out to me on the program. But I have that there for you, and I hope you'll think about it. I'd really appreciate it. So please go and consider that. Thanks for listening as you always do. Thanks for taking time out. And remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.